out and multiple parts. And I just let you share. Yeah. So I know how busy you are, but you've taken time of that heavy schedule to be with us. So I'm very grateful for that. Also, you would all be surprised to know that I've known Fiona for over 12 years now. So Fiona was my lecturer in South Wales University. So from 2009 to 2012. So Fiona was my lecturer. So now she's my good friend and my colleague, and I still learn quite a lot from Fiona. So for that, I'm grateful. Back to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Reza. I shall attempt to share my screen now.
Yeah.
Right, sorry. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where will I shove that? I'll shove that over here somewhere. Okay. Right, will we kick off? So I am a reader at Cardiff Met University. I work in the Cardiff School of Technologies there. My background is in human-computer interaction, and I'm also very much involved in creative technology, and hence why I'm here in TechnoQuest today. For those of you that missed the start of the meeting, TechnoQuest is the Science Museum in Cardiff, and we're putting up a creative tech exhibit at the moment. So I'm Program Director for Computing with Creative Design at Cardiff Met, and I'm also co-leading the Creative Computing Research Centre there. So one of my areas of interest in terms of research is around the human factors of cybersecurity, and I'm very interested around this idea of usable security. And I'll talk a bit about that as we move through the slides. But in conjunction with that, I'm also interested in cybersecurity awareness and how we can work together, design and develop interfaces so that end users like us all are equipped to be more aware whilst online. And I'll also take you through some of that thinking, but also some of the work that I'm doing in that area. And that is, we spoke a while ago about Canada, and that is what has taken me out to Canada to hopefully work with some researchers out there around the design of warnings and cautions online. So first off, when we look at cyber attacks, and it's really come to the surface. It has been there lingering for a good number of years, but particularly during COVID, a lot of us would have either had first-hand experience of a data breach or a security breach, or have heard of somebody or some organization that has had a cyber attack. But the science is showing that one of the major threats to cybersecurity are humans, are the company's own employees. And just to give you, a bit of a context, the stats from 2021 from the, I can never get it's the DC, so the Department of Cultural Media and Sports. So they do, and I'm guessing some of you might, and I know Reza will most definitely be aware of their yearly reports. But for 2021, they were saying that 4 out of 10 businesses and a quarter of charities would have experienced a cyber attack. And I find the stats around that human element, where will I shove this? Sorry, I shoved down there. you know, it's quite interesting, you know, when they say that a self-reported data breach is 7 times more likely to be a human error than a malicious attack. So like, you know, data breaches happening because of human error, and that's really what I find. Sorry, I don't know what you're seeing, but I'm trying to, the screen, the interface is not big enough for all the component. Let's put it up there. So let's move on to the next slide. So essentially, why are people making errors online, particularly around their safety and security? And that's what I'm interested in, you know, like, is security not usable when we go online? Are we not designing our security systems effectively enough for humans, people, to be able to use them? And often you'd hear the kind of the narrative, oh, people are just lazy, they don't understand, you know, the risks. And again, you know, the research is showing that's not the case. They do understand the risks, but particularly in, you know, in a corporate perspective, they are juggling security and productivity. So like, they want to get their jobs done, you know, that's what they see as, you know, as the reasons why they're employed. They need to be productive. And they find often, if they don't understand the security mechanisms, or it's taking too much time or putting too much load on them, they just work around them. And hence you have your security breaches, you have your data breaches, etc. So when we talk about usable security, we need to look at, you know, these security mechanisms working for people and not against them, which is often happening. So usability is something that, if any of you have had any experience of human computer interaction, is, you know, is one of the core strands of it. And usability has been around, you know, really from the mid-80s. So like when Tim Berners-Lee came up with the World Wide Web, you know, we suddenly in the mid-80s started to see this coming into our homes. And what was happening was that, you know, websites were being developed, systems even were being developed. You know, it was a really, really productive movement in the 80s around tech and tech development. But these were being designed, you know, by computer scientists and engineers, and the focus was on, we need to create these functional pieces, a functional website, a functional system. And usability didn't come into the agenda, but very quickly the public started to say, well, I can't use it, I can't turn it on. And I, you know, grew up through the 80s, so I have first-hand experience of this, particularly from my perspective was the VCR recorder. Now, I know some of you mightn't even know what that is now, because it isn't used like it used to be used in the 80s. So that was back in the time before smart television and before Netflix. But the VCR recorder was a device that enabled us to record programs on the television. So I grew up when there was 2 channels, and if you wanted to watch one, you'd miss what was on the other, basically. So we'd use a VCR recorder. But in terms of usability, every time I went to record a television program, I had to relearn how to use this device. It wasn't intuitive. And the definition that I have in front of us is by Sutcliffe. It's from the 90s. It's quite an old definition, but I think it's a really nice one to sum up usability. So it's all about effectiveness, the measure of how well the system performs in achieving what you know the user wants and needs to do. Learnability, how easy is it to learn? Memorability, you know, this is where the VCR recorder went down for me. As I said, I had to remember every time, not even remember, I had to relearn. And then attitude and satisfaction, you know, does this experience, this digital experience, satisfy the user. So that sums up usability. And as I said, out of the 80s came a huge movement, and Jakob Nielsen, you know, it's worth having a look at his website there. He came up with 10 usability heuristics. Now, this stuff is old school, but still quite relevant. But it was groundbreaking, and he was called the guru of usability, really. So, like, basically, he told web designers and web developers, if you abide by these 10 heuristics, you will have an experience, a digital experience that is usable. So let's pull that back into security. So we have moved on. How many years ago? It was the 80s, you know, like you're looking at, you know, nearly 30 years ago, 40 years ago, actually. And we're in a different world. We're not in the same world. And I personally feel that the internet, as it's designed at the moment, is not fit for purpose. So yes, it's functional. Yes, it's more or less usable in that general sense. There are some applications and services that you go on and you go, oh, this is painful, you know, painful to use. So there is still a bit of that, but generally, what is on the internet is usable in that general sense. But in terms of security, do I go on the internet? Do I feel that I'm in control of my security, my safety, my privacy? No, I don't. And in that sense, that I am a firm believer, really, that it's not fit for purpose. It needs to evolve with the times. And I think it's stuck in this time warp of, you know, the early 90s, really. So making, how do we make security tasks fit or usable? Now, SciBOC, if you're not familiar with the SciBOC resource, online resource, it's a really nice one. It comes out of Bristol University, but they talk about usable security around, you know, we need to look at the capabilities and the limitations of our end users. So for example, you know, do we want to hit the end user with endless passwords? You know, we are human at the end of the day. We're not machines. You know, we can only retain so much information. We can't spout off. Well, actually, I know there's probably some people that can, but generally, you know, as humans, we can't remember highly secure, totally randomized numbers, characters, symbols, to ensure we've got that utmost security. And it's a hard task, because if a user is expected to remember all these highly secure passwords, they will need to either write it down, or they will need some means of helping and supporting them to remember it. So we need to think about the capabilities, our capabilities, but also our limitations. The goals those users have and the tasks that they carry out to achieve them. So again, you know, look at the corporate sector. You know, people are busy. Look at all of us. You know, we're busy. You know, we don't want, you know, a whole pile of security tasks added on to, you know, it should be more seamless. Looking at the physical and the social context, the capabilities and limitations of the device. And again, looking at, again, with the use of the device, looking at the end user. So these devices, these systems need to be designed with security and privacy, you know, entwined from the ground up, not something that, oh, we've designed a system, we'll bolt on the security. It needs to be entwined right from, you know, that you know, design phase of any system or website. So it's interesting when we start to look at security and privacy, because even though they're used often together or interchangeably, there are a different, there is a difference. And I think this graphic really kind of highlights that privacy is very much, it relates to your control over your personal information and what you do with it. It's your right to be able to control that personal information. Security then is how that information, how your personal information is protected. And there is a really nice book, Cybersecurity Ethics, by Mary Manjikan, and she talks about security and privacy and the need for transparency, efficiency, accountability, and accessibility, but also confidentiality, respect, and empathy, regard for reputation, and this idea of forgiveness and forgetting. And that's something that, does the internet ever forget? Like, it's really nice a nice book to kind of, if you're interested in both these areas. But in terms of going back into, I suppose, my area, human-computer interaction, and the idea of, designing systems from the ground up with privacy and security in the heart of it. There are initiatives, and one of them is the Privacy by Design. It stemmed out of Canada, and it's an approach, and sorry, I can't even talk, an approach that systems engineers take to ensure that privacy of individuals happens at the very beginning. And again, just to give you a feel for the principles, proactive, not reactive. So it should be privacy, secure, but privacy in this instance by default. It's not something that after the system is built that needs to be considered. Privacy embedded into the design, full functionality. And often a lot of these are hard for companies to actually just get into their psyche, because they're so accustomed to working with, okay, we want a functional system. It needs to be able to process X, Y, and Z. And if that X, Y, and Z involves data, the privacy concerns around that could be, that afterthought. So it really needs to be embedded right into the start of any design and development of tech. So that's just a feel for usable security. So again, just to recap on that, I feel that, as I said, the internet and the services and the apps and the websites on the internet aren't fit for today's needs, really, not fit for the purpose of 2022 and onwards. And I think as tech designers and developers, we need to start really thinking about how we design these to ensure that the end user, i.e. me and all of you, are equipped to take control of our privacy and security online. So I'm just going to jump now across into the cybersecurity awareness, and I'm going to start with the hook. So like you might have heard, well, you don't have to go online, like you don't, like, and I tell my students, well, it's your call, but it's such a hook, isn't it? Like, we can't even go out without our smartphones. Actually, I'll just show off my phone. So I have made the jump to non-smart. It was quite a hard move to make, but I've managed, and I'm feeling massive exclusion from stuff, so from clubs and from interactions. But I'm coping all right. But there, I think the thing is, it's the convenience. Everything is happening online, and people feel that they're missing. Like I remember when I was, going out in the 90s, it was like keys and wallet. You know, now it's keys, wallet, and phone, you know, and I would even rank it like the phone, the smart device is up there. But I think, you know, it has us hooked so much, and that is because of the convenience that it affords us. But let me just read out this again from a kind of a security angle. So Alice enters a 12-digit alphanumeric passcode to access her account. Then she curses and re-enters a different 12-digit alphanumeric code several times. Numbers, capital letters, special characters, no repeats. It just is a little too much for her. So here she is battling and sweating over getting the right password in because she hasn't remembered the password to access her device, her account. On the other hand, you've got Bob, who touches a screen with his fingers. A camera turns on and verifies that the face appearing at the screen matches the fingerprints provided. Okay, so you've got two different sagas there. And I kind of wanted to share that with you because you hear a lot in cybersecurity, oh, the humans are the weakest link. You know, I don't believe they need to be called the weakest link. I think, you know, it's easy to blame the person in this, but I think we need to look at, well, I suppose to blame the person, i.e. the end user. But I think the person who's designing this tech needs to think about, you know, how they design them for the end user. And in that sense, I think if tech is used effectively, it won't put the human in that position around being that weakest link. And let me give you a scenario. I don't know if anybody recognizes that building. Any takers? No? Nobody? This is from my hometown. I lived outside the city, but this is the city, Limerick City, at the west coast of Ireland. And this is the bus and railway station from the city. So in the 90s, when I used to be coming in from the countryside, in and out into college, into university, out clubbing, etc., I would have come in on the buses into this station, and then off I'd go through the city. So it was somewhere that I would have frequented quite often. And back in the 90s, it was a place, it didn't look like this. It was a place that was definitely, at the time, the city actually was known as Stab City. So the railway station and the bus station was something that you were constantly looking around, you know, over your shoulder. But I was back there 2 years ago, and I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh my gosh, it's been given a facelift, and there was lots of people sitting around the front. So I drove into the station with my sister, and we were picking up my mother and my daughter. They were coming down on the train for Dublin. So my sister said, pull in there, I'll run in and get the two, and you just wait in the car. And I said, that's fine. And as she got out of the car, she said, shut your door and close your windows. And I was like, what? It just kind of got me thinking, because here was me thinking, oh, this place looks really nice now. It looks really, it's been peopleified, and it looks quite safe to sit around. But as I sat in the car, I started to pick up the cues in the environment, and I started to look at, you know, things like, I could see there was an area next to the station where a lot of drug addicts used to hang out, and I started to pick them out. I could pick up the derelict buildings and the graffiti. So even though the surface looked, you know, quite nice, once you started to probe the environment a little deeper, you could start to see that, you know, a lot of what I'd experienced in the 90s is still there. It is still a place that you need to be wary of and have your wits about you. But there's a body of research, situational awareness by Ensley, and that came out in the 90s. And it was very much about being aware in your environment. So like I was in that physical world, physical world. I was in Limerick City looking around. I was doing exactly as her framework entails. Like I was clocking, I was looking around, I was identifying different cues. Then I was processing them, making sense of them, and then I was projecting, making decisions off of that. And there I was sitting in the car, and I said, right, I think it was a good move to roll up my windows and lock the doors. And the point behind this really is that we don't have that luxury when we go online, even though we describe the virtual space very much like what we describe the physical space. Like we've got rooms, we've got windows, we travel, we've got communities online. It's been described like a global village, but we do not have the cues like we have in the physical world. We don't have, and again, just to give you another example, like if you look at products in the real world, like if you picked up a bottle of bleach, there are warnings on that bottle to say, do not consume, do not pour on your skin, etc. So there are cues, and if we navigate in the physical world, we've got road signs, we've got cautions, we know through these the signage, these cues. Like if I took any of you and put you into Limerick City, and without a map, without Google Maps, without your phones, like you would use your senses, you'd navigate, and you would know pretty fast if you went into a dangerous area. You would clock the cues in your environment. And that is what I feel is missing online. Professor Luciano Floridi, I don't know if you've read or seen any of his work, but he's part of the Oxford Internet Institute. Sorry, I had to think what was the other I. He does a lot around online ethics, but he talks and has some really nice stuff around the digital footprint, or digital footprint, and they should be precious. My digital footprint should be precious to me, and I should feel harmed if somebody interferes with that digital footprint or takes data from me. And what I'm finding is people don't, and it's a very complex scenario online, like we're hooked by this convenience. So it's almost like for the convenience, we're giving, companies access to all our data. And as a result, our privacy, our security are at risk. But because this convenience is so strong, we seem to have kind of warped into this existence like, I'm not bothered. I asked my student, yeah, no, I'm not bothered. And it's like, how do you change that mentality? Like I tell them, like, would you go out in the middle of the street and shout out all your personal information? And they're like, no way. That would be, the last thing they would do. But they seem to think it's okay to do that online. And that's where I suppose my area of research sits. And just to finish up really by showing you some work I've been doing over the last few years, and then just to kind of round it off with the work I'm hoping to do in Canada now in the summer. But I'm very much interested in how we enable people with that sense to, that faculty to sense harm online. Again, comparing it to the physical world, me in my car in Limerick City by the railway station, I started to pick up the cues and sense that this is not 100% safe area. How do we recreate that online? Or even further, how do we enable people with the want to care about their privacy and security online? And a work that I did with, I worked for a bit at the University of West of England, and I worked with Professor Phil Legg, and we were interested in, you know, different ways of visualizing that online experience. So we looked at everything from edges and nodes to laptops. So we were interested to see what it takes for people to make sense of what's happening. So we ended up visualizing it around the M25, and the idea that, you know, maybe if end users could see cars continually entering a building, and that building going up in flames, that might be a way of informing them around kind of what happens in terms of attacks online. So that was a body of research we did. So we were looking at finding ways to visualize what's happening in terms of the internet, so that people are more empowered to sense that, okay, well, it doesn't seem right that these cars are endlessly driving into this building and it going up in flames. We took that a bit further a year or so after that, and we looked at the network denial of service attack, and we looked at the edges and nodes and looking at different types of lines. So when we start to put squiggly lines or blurred lines or different colored lines, does that have an effect on the visualization of a network? And then I think this is probably the most recent. This is a conversation article that I had published last January. And I was quite interested in this. Actually was a project, this was a project that I was doing with CYTREC, who are the neuroscience department at Cardiff University. And we had a really exciting research project planned, but COVID hit actually just at the wrong time for us. So we were hoping to look at people's brain activity around these visual signs, but going into a hard lockdown in April 2020 meant that we couldn't go anywhere near the EEG system, so we had to have a plan B, which was a questionnaire-based study. But we were interested in kind of knowing what was needed to alert people, you know, so like, as you can see, there's some, you know, as simple as just a blocking with red seems to be the thing, because around that time, well, I suppose it was just starting to kick off. I think probably about a year, 9 months, a year later, we saw the fact finders coming through. And, you know, like, because we had this huge wave of misinformation around COVID. So the work was just before that, where we were trying to create a scenario that would give people that gut feeling that, okay, no, I don't even want to look or read that post. And then out comes the fact finders. And I think even still, people are so disengaged with facts and science that they switch off. And I still believe, and that's why I'm going out to Canada, because I think we need to look at the design of our interfaces, and we need a signage, a set of standards around how cautions and warnings can be portrayed and provided for the end user to ensure that they can then take control of their own and you know, their own experiences online. And it could be a case of I'm not bothered, but we're hoping to try and get beyond that in terms of really tapping into the kind of intuitive side as opposed to the factual side, just really coming at it from that situational awareness. If they can look at a web service and pick up cues via various different signs that will then give them that feeling that, no, actually, I don't think I want to risk going on that service, going on that website, etc. And I think that's it. That's me in a nutshell. I will stop sharing my screen now. I don't know if anybody has any questions or
Thank you very much, Fiona.
no
Are
problem.
there any questions for Fiona?
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for taking your time to come speak to us today. Your presentation was really interesting.
Oh, thank you, Abby. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Yeah. Any questions? Any further questions before we let Fiona off? No? Okay, Fiona. Thank you so much for the kindness you showed by giving up your time to present with us. Yeah. Thank you very much, Fiona.
No problem. It was my pleasure. Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye now.